Hello and welcome to the first event in our NeoSystems monthly 30-minute webinar series. Today's discussion will focus on Deltek Costpoint integrations, particularly through the use of web services. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A area and we'll get to them to as many of them as possible towards the end of the webinar. Now I'd like to hand things over to our first speaker, Brad Mitchell of NeoSystems. Brad?
Thanks, Don. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks, I'll speak at least for me and Jeff, for making us take a shower this morning. That doesn't often happen. Don's in marketing, so I'm sure that happens with him every morning, but thank you for joining us. So Don, if you can go to the next slide. Just a quick little introduction to NeoSystems. For those of you not familiar with us, we offer a number of services, focusing primarily on the GovCon nonprofit space, but also commercial for project-based firms. We offer managed security services, including CMMC compliance and secure enclaves. We offer hosting services, FedRAMP and ITAR compliant. We do managed services as well, back office accounting, human capital, recruitment, and information technology. And we also do systems integrations, including implementations, upgrades, extensibilities, and system reviews. Next slide, Don, please. My name is Brad Mitchell. I'm a solution architect on the professional services side of NeoSystems, and we have with us today Jeffrey Arms, who heads up our technical group also on the professional services side. So today we're going to talk about Costpoint and integrations with Costpoint. So most of you, I assume, on this call are Costpoint users, and Costpoint 7, as you know, was a very big upgrade from prior versions of Costpoint. It included a lot of great features, including a true software as a service model, a really redesigned user interface. One of the more exciting things it did was extensibilities. So extensibilities allow you to customize the application in specific ways and allow Costpoint upgrades to continue to happen without really breaking your system and allowing your extensibilities to continue. One of the less known things that was implemented is what's called web services, which allows integrations to and from Costpoint. So we're here today to talk with Jeff to kind of understand what web services are and in particular how they work with Costpoint. So Jeff, can you explain to us at a high level what web services are and how they really work?
Sure, Brad. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, a web service or API is actually a way two applications talk to each other. What they do is it's a communication back and forth. You start with a message that goes from one application to another. The second application then consumes that message and gives you a response back. So you always have a communication and a conversation back and forth between the two systems. There are multiple types of APIs or web services, and today what we're going to be talking about are web service APIs. So they're going to be all done within the internet and behind the scenes and through custom applications. The two most common ones that we are going to be referring to are REST and SOAP APIs. These are common industry type APIs that allow the structure to be normalized. And when we do this, everybody can actually reuse the same code and it becomes a very common interface so that when you're trying to do multiple interfaces or multiple transactions, everything is very similar so that you can go from interface to interface without a high learning curve.
Okay, sounds good. So I know, and that's a lot kind of confusing for people, web services and APIs, API standing for application programming interface. They both really mean the same thing, so they're kind of used interchangeably by tech people, but most people don't realize they're actually one and the same thing. So a lot of the questions I get asked when talking about web services is people are a little kind of freaked out. So I have this Costpoint application out there, let's say, and it's out there exposed to the internet. It's a web service that people from anywhere across the web can access. So is that, I mean, it does seem a little scary. What kind of security is around web services?
Yeah, Brad, don't be, web services are very secure. I'm not going to go into the detailed specifics of them, but all major companies that pass data back and forth use either APIs or web services. There are multiple levels of security, and it really depends on how you're going to be using your API and how secure you need your environment. For example, if you are using Costpoint and another application that you have loaded locally that are behind a firewall that never really go out to the full internet, you may just use a simple authentication of an ID and password. That may be sufficient enough because it's not really going out to the web service. But if you have an API that is open to the public like ADP or Salesforce, this one is going to require stricter security. So you may need to add what's called an access token. So you would need to make a request to that web service to get a short one-term token ID that when you make the call to actually get the data out, you have to include that token. That token is a short-term one-time use token so that you can't reuse it, someone steal it, or it being reused multiple times. So it's a additional level of security that is added to it. There is also type of firewalls and all of IT security that can be added to these web services as well, IIS. So again, it's used by multiple companies. It's very secure. It's the standard protocol for all data passing back and forth. So you should feel very safe with using a web service to pass data back and forth.
Okay, great. Definitely good news. So I think at this point, we're going to talk a little bit more about web services and Costpoint. But Don, I think we have a poll that we can put up and just kind of get a quick feel for what kind of integrations people on this call are looking for. So what types of systems are you interested in integrating to your accounting system is the question here, just so we can get kind of a rough idea what most of the people are looking for. So I'll pause for a minute, let you respond, and then Don can let us know when we have some results. Okay. Payroll systems predominantly. Okay, that's not too surprising. We see that a lot and pretty evenly split among the other types of accounting or types of ERP systems that people are using there. So not too surprised by those answers. Great, Don, I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Jeff, so back to Costpoint, which again, most of the people on this call are probably more interested in. So what does it mean specifically now that Costpoint has web services?
Okay, the way I want you to think of a web service is whatever you can do from the front end. So if you're manually typing something in a screen, what the web service does is it replicates that exact process through the back end, through a automated system. So any screen that you can actually type in, you can create and convert into a web service. The most important thing, though, that I do want you to realize is that when you use a web service, it also uses all of the front end validations and an account org combination that if you typed it through the front end that is not valid, the web service will not enter that data. It will respond back to you saying that that account org combination is not valid. You will then need to fix it and resubmit the web service. What that does is it stops incorrect or inaccurate data from getting into Costpoint and will not create any downstream function issues so that when you do get to rolling up your billing or rolling up your calculations, all the data will be correct. So if it will not pass front-end validations, it will not pass web service so that you can be secure and ensure that all of your downstream processes are going to be just as accurate using a web service as it is using the front end of Costpoint.
Okay, fascinating. So that's really interesting. So anything you do through the front end, all those validations are going to be done with web services. So it's really just kind of a faster way of entering things through the front of the screen and automated. Fantastic. Okay, so then the next question I get asked a lot is how hard is this to enable? How much does this cost me to expose these web services? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's actually very straightforward and very easy once you've learned and had training on the web service. Costpoint has given us a tool called a Web Integration Council, or WIC for short. And this WIC is available on any version of Costpoint 7.0.1 and above. This can be used if you are locally, if you have it in a local on-premise environment, or if you are in a Deltek, Neosystems, or any other hosted SaaS environment. And the best part of this is that it's completely free. You just need to get a license. The license is free. You just need to add that license to your Costpoint and you can use these web services. To actually build the web service, it's very straightforward. You log into this tool and you choose which screen or result set that you would like to expose or create as a web service. Once you choose your screen, you will get a list of all of the data objects on that screen. You choose which data objects you would like to select and then build the web service from there. You can create multiple different web services for different tasks that you have. For example, one of the poll question mentioned that we're looking for HR. So you may want to have a web service that is for new hires. And for new hires, you're going to need lots of fields. You're going to need the employee ID, the salary, the start date, your type of employee, all these multiple different fields that you need to set up an employee for onboarding. You can create a web service that has all of those fields already created. But you may also want to have a web service for terminations of employee. If an employee leaves the company, you may only need 3 or 4 information. You need that employee ID, you need the status of the employee, and you need the termination date. You don't care what their salary is. You don't care what any of those other fields are. You just want to create a web service that's just strictly set for termination. So you can actually create 2 web services that go to the same screen that have different functionality. One for new hire, one for termination. So it's very customizable and allows you to customize and do whatever you want it to do. And again, these can be created within a matter of minutes and deployed and set into your system.
Fantastic. And one of the big takeaways I kind of heard from there is you kind of have control over what fields you expose. So for example, on the employee screens, if I didn't want to expose very confidential information like social security number, I could choose not to do that. So another layer of security there. Fantastic. Okay, so we talked a little bit earlier about extensibility. So a lot of people have deployed extensibility units. They might add custom fields to forms. They might add additional actions they call database stored procedures. They might even add additional screens to Costpoint to do something particular for them. So can you talk to us a little bit about how web services interacts with those extensibility fields, and can we see them via web services?
Yes. And kind of, I mean, I don't know if people in the past have used preprocessor files. Those are kind of standard. You can't manipulate, you can't change them, you can't add new files. Web services are completely the opposite. They are completely customizable, and you can add anything that you've added to the screen can again be added to the web service. So if you have added a new field to a screen, if you've added a new screen, if you added a new application, if you've added a new function or a new action or a new process, those can all be called from web services. It's very flexible and very easy to use. When you add these, you just go into what we call, again, the WIC and add that extension to your web service. You can either add those fields, remove fields, and do whatever you want. Once you go into the web service, you can modify and change that screen, save it, redeploy it, and it's ready to use within minutes. The one nice thing that Costpoint has also done is they've created what they call generic web services. What that means is that you do not need to restart your Costpoint instance as well. The old web services you used to have to restart and bring down Costpoint so that you could test and change and modify. So with these new changes, all you do is you just save it, it redeploys it, you then immediately can actually test. So it saves your downtime and interruption in production or even in your test environment. So it's very easy to do. We can update and deploy those things probably within just a few minutes of making the changes.
Okay, fantastic, sounds good. So we kind of focused a lot already about interfacing to Costpoint, so how Costpoint exposes web services, right? So obviously a lot of times we're going to have clients are going to have external systems they want Costpoint to really push or pull data from. So can you tell us like how that would really be done in Costpoint itself to interface with other external web services?
Sure, Brad. Yeah, a cost point is, web services are the tools that we are using, but they are just a tool. The real goal that we are trying to accomplish is to create seamless and automated integration so that we don't have people doing putting data in twice, having any integration or any steps, any process with multiple systems. So what we use is we use the web services as a tool to create our integration. So for an example, again, you guys were looking at a lot of people were looking at making web services for HR and integrating HR. So what we have is you may be using Costpoint and ADP and actually calculating your leave balances in Costpoint, but need to send them to ADP so that they show up on the biweekly checks. So what you would do is you could create a web service pulling the balance types and hours out of Costpoint. That would be what we call an export web service. We then would take that data from Costpoint, retransform it, and create a ADP import web service. So that what would happen is we then would take the data out of Costpoint, then push it into ADP so that all the hours and all the balance types are now in the ADP so that they can be put on the checks. This process can also be created on a schedule. So what we can do is it says if it has the check run on the 15th and the 30th, on the 14th and the 28th, what we are doing every week is we are pulling all of the data. We are then uploading it into Costpoint, and then every morning that job runs, you then can get an email that says that this job is complete, the process is done, and here's all of the employees that have been updated. So instead of having the old way of them creating a report, printing out the report in Costpoint, going into the ADP application, uploading that report, making sure that it's successful, spending an hour and two of just doing, the daily grind of making those transactions, you've now automated the system. It's done every week without any manual intervention. They get the email that it's complete, they check that off, and then now it's good to go. So, that is our main goal, is to help you automate and help stop doing repetitive tasks that can be done through an automated process.
Okay, fantastic. So just to wrap up kind of the main part of the presentation here today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of integrations you can do, and most of these Systems has done for clients. For example, you can write an extensibility unit, as Jeff was just talking about, that uses web services to go out and interface with foreign exchange subscription services. Almost all the foreign exchange services I'm aware of expose a web service or an API that can be consumed. So you can pull in daily or monthly rates, whatever you need for multi-currency, and update those tables in Costpoint, so there's no manual entry and opportunity for error. We see this also a lot with tax rate services. So whether it be sales tax or payroll tax, if you're running payroll internal to Costpoint, again, web services can go out and make sure that those tax rates are updated on a regular basis via web services. Budgeting tools. We are a partner at Neosystems with Workday Adaptive, one of the more popular budgeting tools out there these days. And web services are used by a lot of clients to interface with Workday Adaptive. And that includes to pull actuals over so that after you have an initial baseline budget, you can do forecasting and things along those lines. And then workflow tools. So again, we're a partner with Integrify, one of the premier workflow tools out there. So Integrify can interact with Costpoint itself via web services to pull information it might need in a workflow form, like you're choosing a requisition, you need a certain project to be pulled out of Costpoint. You can do that kind of integration. HR systems, Ultimate Software, it's Ultipro system, which again, we deploy here at Neosystems. Any kind of interfacing you can do with that. Obviously the big payroll services, ADP, Ceridian, Paychex, and others, almost all of those have web services available that you can use and set up in Costpoint to integrate with. And then another big one is time collection systems and expense systems, so expense report systems. Concur, one of the more popular ones out there these days. We can interface with web services via Concur. In fact, NeoSystems has built what's called a Concur connector to do this specifically, and get not only pull expense reports, but keep the Concur system data up to date, and then also push back to Concur when expense reports have been paid, so the employees are always aware of that. So a lot of possibilities out there. We've seen a lot of examples of this, and that's really why we wanted to focus today on web services and what they can do, the possibilities you have with your Costpoint instance. So Don, I think at this point is the Q&A session. We'll keep this pretty open discussion. Jeff or I will address any questions anyone has. Don?
Sure, we do have a question in the Q&A box, so go ahead and put that out to you guys. The question is a web service a form of RPA app?
And Jeff, I think I'll refer this to you. Are we not familiar with that acronym, RPA?
I'm not familiar with that.
Can you clarify, whoever asked the question, RPA, what the acronym stands for, please?
Okay, so RPA is robotic process application. So is web service a form of robotic process application?
I mean, they may use an API for the robot for that. I can do some investigation and see exactly what that RPA consists of, and we can follow up if that's something that you're definitely interested in. That's something I can follow up if they want to leave us their information. I will definitely look into that for them.
Okay, great. Another question's come in. Says, can you show us the WIC system?
So I think we're referring to the web integration console, and I think we were trying to keep this to kind of a short half hour. So a screen share, I don't want to put Jeff on the spot right now to pull up his screen share, but we're certainly happy to do that. We can respond back to whoever asked that question, and if you want like a quick 5-minute walkthrough, absolutely happy to do that. And maybe even at some point on, we can do kind of a follow-on webinar that is more of a screen share, more of an informal for those more technical people if they'd like to see it.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to put Brad and Jeffrey's contact information up on the screen in just a moment, and so you can contact them directly with that question or others after the fact. We also have a few questions that were submitted prior to the webinar that I can share with you all. The first one is, why would I want to use web services?
So I'll take that one. I mean, the question is, what other options are really out there? The way that, before web services were kind of wildly available, you really had 3 options, including manual entry into systems, right? So a lot of times this happened with ADP, where you'd be entering data in ADP and entering the same data in Costpoint. Obviously, tedious, error-prone process. The other option out there was non-web-based APIs. So APIs of application programming interfaces have been around for a while, but if they're not web-based, you might have to have 2 systems co-located with each other, which obviously nowadays with the distributed nature of technology is not always feasible. And then the other one that's used a lot is like CSV or flat file exchange of information, which again can be very insecure based on how you get information back and forth. And could also be error prone depending on file format issues and things like that.
Great, we actually have a couple more questions that have come in the Q&A area. The first one is, would a generic web service be able to log into our bank account, download, calc, then update a daily cash spreadsheet?
Well, you could use, I can maybe take this one. So you would probably have 2 different web services for that. Whatever your bank system, so if that's what you're asking, if you log into whatever bank you're using, they would open up a API for you. Depending on what they allow you to do, you could then download that, do your daily calculations, and then upload that into Costpoint if that's kind of what you're expecting. So it's kind of a to and from for that, where you can actually pull the data out of one into another one Um, I hope that kind of answers the, so again, it depends if it's a generic web service, that would actually be whatever's distributed from your actual bank or not, which since that's normally opening to the internet, usually that again is a more secure web service than if you're doing things internally.
Okay, another question that's come in is web services a method of limiting access to Costpoint by users you do not want within Costpoint?
Yes. So the other thing with web services is that if you have to log in with a user ID and password into web services, into the Costpoint web services. So if you are using your login ID and you do not have access to that screen, you cannot get into the web service. So it uses the same module or application right security in the web service as it does through the front end of Costpoint. So that requires, so anything that you can't see, you can't get to it from the web service. It's got this, again, it's just like logging in through the front end of Costpoint. If you can't get to it from the front end, you can't get to it from the web service.
All right, a few more questions are flowing in now. Next one is there a way to hide the authentication ID and password on a web service?
Well, it is open text when you send that, but again, since it is sent normally via application through a web through a web service call, there's nowhere that password really does get displayed unless you display it text into a file or into a log. So again, it does not have, for the Costpoint, the way that SOAP works, it does not hide that. But again, you would have to know, you'd have to actually be a back-end developer to actually see what that is. So you don't actually see the web service call, you just kind of get the response back. And again, I can show you that, if that's something that we'd like to follow up with you, I can show you that information in a later session as well, kind of how the WIC works and how the web service needs to be set up and deployed.
Okay, great. So the next question is there a complete list of the current integrations that were just spoken about, such as ADP, Concur, Integrify, Ultipro, etc.?
So Don, I think we talked about sending out after to all the attendees of the webinar here a kind of details of what we talked about here, kind of bulleted points, and that will definitely include a list of the type of integrations that we talked about. So that will be coming out.
Great. And the last question that we have is there newer documentation available now for web services that includes useful examples for each type, such as import, export, scheduled, etc.?
There is, Costpoint has, or Deltek has put out documentation on that. Some of the documentation, again, is relatively generic, just because, again, each web service is a custom-built web service. They do give you the outlines and how to build them. We can send you that documentation as well if you're looking to build that. And again, if we do want to do a quick training or review of the web services, show you the WIC, we can give you also the information. But again, some of the documentation, again, is very generic. We have come up with training documentation of how to create a web service, but again, everyone is unique depending on what the needs of the client is. So we can definitely discuss that on a further call.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And so that gets us to the bottom of the hour. We certainly want to respect everyone's time. We want to thank everyone for spending a few minutes with us today to learn more about Costpoint integrations. And Brad and Jeffrey, I definitely want to thank both of you for your insight, for your time today. As you can see on the screen, this is the contact information for Brad and Jeffrey. You can certainly reach out to them if you have any additional questions. As Brad mentioned, we will be sending out a follow-up in the coming days with some additional information regarding what you saw in this presentation, so you can keep an eye out for that. And also keep an eye out for some additional monthly webinars that we'll be having. We'll be doing these monthly through the end of the year. Next one we'll be doing is regarding time and expense 10. So we'll have information on that coming very soon. So please keep an eye out for those promotions. So that'll do it for today. Again, thank you all very much for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you.